Did you know a tiny facial movement could be like an almost certain sign of long-term relationship trouble? Seriously. It's kind of wild. Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we grab a whole bunch of really fascinating communication and psychology research, and we pull out the really juicy bits for you. So think of it as your shortcut, getting the gist of some complex stuff with takeaways you can actually use. Hopefully you get those aha moments without your brain feeling totally fried.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it, how these tiny little details can tell us so much about who we are and how we connect. So today, yeah, we're looking at everything from those subtle signals that might predict where a relationship is heading to maybe the biology behind why some of us worry more, and even, like you said, the surprising power of just a profile picture.
Exactly. So our mission here really is to give you knowledge about interacting, about understanding yourself that you can use like today. We've dug through studies on relationships, personality, how we act online, even some really weird links to our physical bodies. Get ready to maybe rethink a few things.
Okay, so let's jump right into relationships then, because, we often think it's the big blow up fights that are the real danger signs. But the research, it actually points to something much, much quieter, but way more powerful in the long run.
Ah, you're talking about Dr. John Gottman's research, right?
Hmm.
On contempt.
Yeah.
That stuff really blew my mind. It's not just being mean, it's specific.
Precisely. Yeah, Gottman studied couples for years, and he found contempt is just incredibly corrosive for relationships. And one of the biggest giveaways, non-verbally anyway, is this very specific facial expression, a one-sided lift of the upper lip, almost like a smirk or a sneer, maybe.
That little half smile, the one that looks kind of dismissive, like they think they're better than you.
That's the one, yeah. And the accuracy they found predicting divorce, it's stunning. In their long-term studies, seeing that expression pop up often during disagreements predicted divorce with something like 93.6% accuracy.
93.6. Whoa! That's almost unbelievable. Like a relationship weather forecast based on a facial tic. So, okay, what's the real point for you listening right now? Why should you care about a smirk?
Well, it makes you think, doesn't it? In your own close relationships, partner, friends, even at work, how often do you see that look? Or maybe catch yourself doing it. It's a really strong sign that one person feels superior or just has total disdain for the other. Psychologically, it's about feeling morally above them, and that just eats away at any kind of equal partnership.
Okay, right. So if you do spot this happening a lot,
Well,
what do? You can't just yell, aha, you smirked. Gottman says we're finished. That wouldn't go over well.
no, definitely not. But just noticing it is huge. That's step one. If it's happening regularly, it means there's an underlying disrespect issue. So the action step is maybe trying to address the disrespectful behavior directly, but, without pointing fingers. Maybe something like, hey, when that was said, I felt kind of dismissed. And if it's a real pattern, especially with a partner, maybe looking into something like couples therapy could be really important to get at those deeper negative feelings.
That makes a lot of sense. A tiny expression, a huge window. Okay, let's switch gears completely. Let's talk about worrying, something pretty much everyone does.
Right. And this is where we get into that really cool overlap between our feelings and our biology. There's some pretty solid research linking higher neuroticism, that tendency to feel negative stuff like anxiety, worry, sadness, more often linking that to a specific variation in our genes.
Okay, hold on. So that feeling of always worrying, it might not just be like a personality thing you can just snap out of. There could be a physical reason.
Exactly. It's been linked to what's called the short form of the serotonin transporter gene. Now, this gene, its job is basically to help recycle serotonin in the brain. Serotonin, massively important for mood, stress response. And the short form of this gene, it's just not quite as efficient at doing that recycling job.
Huh. So if someone has this gene variation, maybe bouncing back after something stressful,
Yeah.
it takes them a bit longer. Their brain chemistry is just different.
Precisely. Yeah, their brain might just take more time to get back to baseline, back to calm after something negative happens. Because that serotonin regulation isn't working quite as efficiently. It's not like it's your destiny.
Hmm.
But it helps understand a possible biological tendency that can shape how intensely you feel worry and how long it sticks around.
Wow. That is genuinely eye-opening. It really reframes being a worrier, doesn't it? Puts it in a different light. So, okay, if you're listening and thinking, yeah, that sounds like me, what can you actually do with that knowledge?
Well, the first thing, and maybe the most important, is just self-compassion, really.
Mhm.
Knowing there might be a biological piece can help dial down the self-blame. Like, okay, this isn't just me failing. And then the practical stuff involves actively doing things we know support healthy serotonin. Think regular exercise, mindfulness, or meditation practices. Eating well, especially foods with tryptophan, which helps make serotonin, and really leaning into strong social connections. Plus, learning techniques like cognitive reframing, that helps manage the negative thought loops. You're kind of working with your biology then, not just against it.
That's incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
Seriously, understanding the why can really change the how. Okay, let's shift again. Let's look outwards now, how we appear online. Starting with the profile picture. Seems simple, but
Oh, yeah. This is all about digital first impressions.
yeah.
And get this, they happen fast, like within the first 100 milliseconds of someone seeing your profile pic.
Wait, 100 milliseconds? That's
Ah.
that's less than a blink. People are already
Yeah.
judging you.
Absolutely, forming an initial impression. And what's really wild is that different photos of the exact same person can create totally different first impressions.
Whoa.
Which means, actually, that tiny little micro impression is something you can actually control to some extent.
So it's not just having a picture, it's the specific picture that matters a lot.
Totally. Yeah, the photo you choose can massively shift whether someone sees you as, I don't know, competent, friendly, trustworthy, whatever,
Yeah.
all in that first split second.
Okay, that's huge for dating apps, LinkedIn, everything.
Hmm.
So for you listening, wanting to make a good impression online, what's the move?
The practical advice is just be deliberate. Don't just grab the latest selfie, maybe try out a few different options. You can even get feedback. Sometimes there are tools online, or just ask friends, what vibe does this picture give off? Think about what you want to project on that platform and pick a photo that lines up with that goal.
Such simple advice, but could make a real difference. Okay, now for something I found really unexpected, the link between our emotions and Botox.
Right. This gets into something called the feedback hypothesis of emotion. The basic idea is our facial expressions aren't just showing how we feel inside. They can actually feedback and influence what we feel. Our faces don't just show emotions, they can kind of nudge them along.
So like the old saying, grin and bear it might have some truth. Forcing a smile could actually make you feel a tiny bit better.
That's the core idea, yeah. The physical act of making the face sends signals back to the brain, and that can sort of adjust the emotional volume.
Okay, so how does Botox fit in? Because that stops muscles moving, right?
Exactly. Botox temporarily paralyzes specific muscles. So think about those lines between your eyebrows, the anger lines or 11s. People get Botox there to smooth them out. By limiting how much those muscles can move, it makes it physically harder to make a deep frown. And according to this feedback idea, that might mean the person actually feels anger or frustration a bit less intensely. Same logic could apply to smile lines, maybe subtly dialing down how intensely happiness is felt if those muscles are restricted.
Huh, that's fascinating. And kind of a weird potential side effect. So if you're thinking about procedures like that.
It's just something to be aware of,
Hmm.
this potential subtle link to how you experience your emotions. It probably wouldn't stop most people, but it's good to know about that intricate mind-body connection.
Absolutely. Good heads up. Okay, let's dive into personality again, specifically narcissism. We hear that word a lot.
Mhm.
What are some signs maybe we don't usually think about beyond just someone seeming arrogant?
Right, because it's not just about scoring high on certain traits necessarily. A really key thing can be how someone relates to their own personality, their own scores, their own flaws, or lack thereof.
Okay, unpack that a bit. What should you look out for?
Well, usually when people talk about their personality, even confident people, they'll admit, okay, sometimes I'm too blunt, or I struggle with X. They see pros and cons. A potential red flag for narcissistic tendencies is when someone seems utterly convinced that all their traits are perfect, like genuinely perfect, and they insist these traits have never caused them any problems, ever, in any situation.
Ah, so it's like a complete lack of self-awareness. They just can't see any downside to how they are.
Precisely. It's this unwavering belief that their way is always right, and if there are problems, it's always someone else's fault, someone else's shortcomings. So listening for that persistent lack of self-reflection, even in just casual chats about personality, that can be a pretty subtle but telling sign.
That's a really useful distinction. Goes deeper than just the obvious stuff.
Okay.
Okay, now for another surprise link. Extroverts and their immune systems. Is that right?
Yeah, get this. It's an interesting area of research still developing, but some studies suggest a potential link. Basically, they found that people who identify as more extroverted tend to show stronger immune responses in blood tests compared to people who are more introverted.
Wow, okay. That's definitely not something I would guess. Why? What's the theory there?
Well, there are a couple of ideas floating around. One is pretty straightforward. Extroverts tend to interact with more people more often in more varied settings, so they just get exposed to more microbes, more germs. And that wider exposure could kind of like train their immune system over time, make it more robust. Another idea is maybe more about brain chemistry, that the positive emotions and social buzz extroverts often get might actually have a direct beneficial effect on their immune function.
Huh. So, okay, for those of us listening who lean more introverted, are we doomed to weaker immune systems? What's the takeaway?
No, not at all. Definitely not doomed. The advice isn't, force yourself to go to huge parties if you hate them. That would just be stressful. It's more about maybe consciously scheduling social interactions that you do find enjoyable and energizing, not draining ones. Think of it like maybe those positive social hits aren't just good for your mood, they might be doing a little something for your physical health too. It's about finding your right balance.
That's a great perspective. Social connection as like proactive self-care with maybe a physical bonus. Love it.
Hmm.
Okay, one more fascinating bit of subtle communication. The handshake. What's the secret there?
Okay, this one's a bit quirky but really interesting. Research has noticed that after people shake hands, especially with someone new, they often unconsciously touch their own face or nose shortly after.
Really? I have never noticed that, ever.
It's usually super quick, very subtle, but the theory why is pretty cool. They've actually measured this. There's a tiny increase in like nasal airflow right after the handshake and face touch.
Yeah.
It suggests we might be subconsciously, well, smelling the other person's hand.
Subconsciously smelling their hand? Why on earth would we do that?
The idea is we might be picking up on subtle chemical signals, pheromones, maybe other scent cues from their skin, and these signals could, again, unconsciously be giving us information about them. Maybe stuff related to their health, their immune system compatibility, maybe even their emotional state. It's wild.
So that gut feeling you sometimes get right after meeting someone, it might actually have a literal chemical component from that handshake.
That's kind of the implication, yeah. We're obviously not aware we're doing this chemical analysis, but it just shows how complex our subconscious processing of others is. So, the practical thought here, maybe just pay a little more attention to those initial gut feelings, those first vibes you get after meeting someone. Especially after shaking hands, your nose might know more than you think.
This has been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Seriously, we've bounced from relationship doom signals and a smirk all the way to sniffing hands after a handshake. Incredible range.
And honestly, it feels like we're just scratching the surface, doesn't it? There's even deeper stuff researchers are digging into about how we communicate and connect.
Yeah. Don't leave us hanging. Like, what else is out there on the cutting edge?
Well, people are looking into things like how tiny, almost imperceptible changes in your voice pitch can transmit emotion, or how couples who are really in sync actually show microsynchronicity in their heart rates, their breathing, stuff like that. And even how strategically using unexpected details, they call them anomaly anchors, in conversation can make things stick in people's memory or influence them. It's a really fast-moving field.
Wow. Okay. It really does feel like there's this whole invisible layer of communication happening all around us. So just to wrap this all up for everyone listening, what's the big picture takeaway from this deep dive?
I think the main thing is just realizing how much more complex and nuanced human behavior and communication really are, way more than we usually think. And by understanding some of these maybe surprising insights, the power of a smirk, the impact of a profile pic, even those subconscious chemical whispers, we get a richer map for understanding ourselves and other people.
Yeah, and it's not just trivia, right? It gives you actual tools to navigate relationships better, be more self-aware, make more conscious choices about how you come across.
Exactly. So maybe a final thought for you to chew on. Just for today, try noticing the little facial expressions, yours, other people's, see what you see, or maybe glance at your main profile picture and ask yourself, what's the instant vibe this gives off? There's this whole fascinating world happening under the surface, and hopefully we've given you a few new ways to look at it.